Imagine standing in a massive open-air mosque in the city of Kufa. We are in the 7th century.
Right, setting the scene.
Yeah, the air is thick, the sun is just absolutely beating down, and the crowd pressed in around you is this incredibly diverse cross-section of humanity.
You've got everybody there.
Exactly. You are shoulder to shoulder with, like, rough-handed farmers, battle-hardened soldiers, wealthy traders, and elite scholars. The murmur of thousands of voices is echoing off the walls.
Mm.
Then a man stands up, the crowd falls completely silent. And in one unbroken, unscripted address, he delivers something so profoundly complex that it fundamentally alters the way we understand reality and our own cognitive limits.
Yeah, we were talking about Sermon 186 from the Naj al-Balagha, delivered by Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib.
That's the one.
And it is difficult to overstate the intellectual earthquake this caused. I mean, this wasn't just a religious sermon. It was a total dismantling of the dominant philosophical frameworks of the time.
It really was. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore exactly how this text takes a sledgehammer to our mental models. It argues that our inability to fully picture or comprehend God is not a failure of our intellect, it's actually a feature.
It is by design.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this because we are going on a serious journey today. For you listening, we're going to start way out in the abstract, mind-bending nature of God. Then we're going to look at the literal mechanics of the dirt beneath your feet. And finally, we're going to travel to the end of time itself.
It's a massive scope. And just to give you an idea of the sheer linguistic and logical power we're dealing with here, there was a later, highly respected scholar of rhetoric named Ibn Abi al-Hadid.
Oh, right. I remember reading about him.
Yeah, so he spent years analyzing classical Arabic texts. And when he encountered this specific sermon, he famously stated that the eloquence of all other Arab orators was just dust compared to this.
Wow.
He called this text pure gold. It is an architectural masterpiece of logic, delivered verbally to a live audience without a single wasted word or, logical gap.
Dust compared to gold. That sets a pretty high bar. But before we can even begin to understand how the world was built, according to this text, we have to look at why our brains are fundamentally ill-equipped to picture the builder. Like, why is it so impossible for us to just imagine what we're talking about?
Well, the sermon opens with a core, uncompromising premise regarding Tawhid, which is the concept of the absolute oneness of God.
Okay.
The premise is brutal in its clarity. Basically, whoever tries to explain what God is like has already failed. Whoever builds a mental model of him has completely missed reality. The moment you compare him to anything, you're no longer talking about the absolute.
Which is completely counterintuitive to how human beings process information, right? I mean, if I want to explain a complex new concept to someone, my brain instantly reaches for a comparison.
Right, we map the unknown onto the known.
Exactly. We say, oh, an atom is kind of like a miniature solar system.
And that is exactly the human tendency the text is attacking. The sermon argues that if you can point to something, even just conceptually in your own mind, and say, there, that is God, and form a boundary around it, you have not reached the absolute.
Because you boxed it in.
Yes, because human categories simply do not apply. The mechanics of the logic here are airtight. Everything that you can identify by what it is was made.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, everything whose existence depends on something outside itself is an effect. If you can describe its edges, someone else drew those edges.
Wait, let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. It's essentially stripping away every human tendency to anthropomorphize, which at the time was massive, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You had Greek frameworks where the gods were basically just superpowered humans who used tools, got angry, and deliberated on Mount Olympus. This text is saying he doesn't act by picking up a tool. He doesn't design by thinking it over.
Exactly that. The text explicitly states he designs with perfect precision, but not by turning possibilities around in his mind the way humans do.
Because that implies doubt.
Right. When you and I design something, we weigh possibilities. We do trial and error in our heads. We wonder, will this work better than that? Deliberation implies a lack of immediate knowledge.
I see.
The absolute doesn't guess and therefore doesn't deliberate.
It's like trying to run a 4D program on a 3D computer. The hardware just isn't built for it. We are the 3D computer. We only know time, space, tools, and deliberation.
Yep.
We can't even imagine an action without a timeline attached to it. But the text talks about him outrunning time, right? It's not just saying, he is really, really old.
Precisely. Time does not walk beside him. He is not a traveler on the road of time, leaving moments behind him.
That's a wild image.
Time is a measurement of change, and the absolute does not change. Therefore, His existence outran time itself. Time never caught up to him. His beginningless eternity outran the very idea of a beginning. There is no starting line behind him.
But hold on, if he doesn't deliberate, if he doesn't use tools, if there's no timeline, no physical format to push back here,
Go for it.
human logic dictates that if you subtract every single measurable characteristic from a subject, you equal 0. If we take away all of these things, how do we differentiate this concept of God from just pure nothingness? Aren't we just worshiping a void?
What's fascinating here is that the sermon anticipates that exact philosophical trap. The text says, his existence outran nothingness.
Outran nothingness.
Yeah, there was never a void that he had to step into and fill.
Yeah.
Think about what nothingness actually is. It implies an absence of something that should be there, or a state before something arrives.
Right, like an empty room waiting for furniture.
Exactly. He did not gather enough resources to stop needing things he simply never needed. The absolute isn't an invisible thing hiding in the dark. It is the fundamental prerequisite for reality itself to exist.
Outran nothingness. That is just a wild concept to me. He is the reason is exists. Okay, so because we've established that the absolute cannot be pictured or subjected to our 3D logic, the sermon sets up these incredibly strict verbal and logical boundaries to protect this idea.
Yes, and this is where the logic gets intensely rigorous. The text issues a very severe warning against using a specific phrase.
Which phrase?
It says you cannot say he existed after he did not exist.
On the surface, that sounds like semantics, honestly. Just a minor phrasing issue. But the sermon treats it like a catastrophic error. So what does this all mean? Why is that specific phrase so dangerous?
Because of the philosophical mechanics of what a trigger is. If you say he existed after he did not exist, you are applying the quality of coming into being at a specific point.
Okay, yeah.
But that implies a transition from state A to state B. And transitions require a catalyst, a trigger.
Ah, and if there is a trigger, there is a cause.
Precisely. You and I came into being at a point because our parents triggered our existence. The Earth came into being because gravity and stellar dust triggered it.
So if God also came into being at a point, then he required an outside force to trigger him.
Which means he's dependent. And if he's dependent on a trigger, he is in the exact same category as us. He's just another effect in the chain.
You've completely erased the dividing line between the maker and the made.
You have. The text argues that if the originator and the originated share the exact same fundamental qualities of needing a trigger, they are equal. But if they're equal, then neither of them is actually the absolute God. Saying he came into existence doesn't just get the math wrong. It destroys the very concept you were trying to establish.
That completely reframes things. It means creation had to be done without any prior template. If there's no trigger and no timeline, there were no rough drafts, no one handed him a blueprint, and there was absolutely no assistance. It is a pure, unprecedented act from literally nothing.
Which brings us to a really difficult logical question.
Okay.
We have this uncreated creator who is entirely outside our frameworks, no form, no time, no deliberation. So how are we supposed to interact with this concept? If we can't look at him, where do we look to find the signature of his work?
We look at the physical world, but we don't just look at it as like a pretty landscape painting. The sermon describes the physical world as a system of managed tensions.
This is one of the most profound observational arguments in the text. And it's a direct counter to other philosophies of the time, specifically Persian dualism.
Right, the Zoroastrian ideas.
Exactly. At the time, Zoroastrian thought posited that light and dark were essentially rival forces, two different gods warring against each other. Sermon 186 rejects that entirely. It argues that, the creator, through the system of opposites he built, and forced to cooperate.
Right, because the one who built the system of opposites cannot be inside that system. The text uses this relentless logic. It says, he gave every living thing its ability to feel, which proves the designer of perception does not perceive through what he designed.
He has no senses like ours.
Yeah, he paired everything in nature, which proves he himself has no pair.
And look at the vivid imagery used for the earth. He set light against darkness, clarity against obscurity, dry against wet, scorching heat against bitter cold.
In nature, these are fundamental enemies. Fire destroys water, cold kills heat.
But he forced them to live together. He married things that have absolutely nothing in common.
It sounds like the ultimate high-stakes roommate situation, forcing scorching heat and bitter cold to share a living space without destroying the house.
It really is. And the earth survives precisely because of that forced management.
That phrase, A system of managed tensions, it makes me think of a massive suspension bridge. Like if you look at the Golden Gate Bridge, the entire thing is held up by opposing forces.
Right.
Huge cables are pulling up, gravity is ripping it down, tension is pulling horizontally. The whole structure only exists because these lethal forces are fighting each other in perfect mathematical balance. But the engineer who designed that tension isn't part of the bridge itself. They're completely outside
A
it.
brilliant analogy. The one managing the tension stands outside every tension. And the sermon goes on to describe the literal planetary mechanics using this exact framework.
Oh yeah, the mountains.
Right. It describes the Earth being raised and anchored on nothing. Mountains driven in like massive stakes so the ground doesn't shift under the feet of the people walking on it. And all of this engineering was done without the creator growing tired, without him getting weary, and without him rushing to finish before patience ran out.
Which loops right back to our first point. Rushing implies you are fighting against a ticking clock. And as we established, time doesn't apply to him.
Exactly.
The consistency here is just staggering. So we have this grand planetary architecture, the mountains, the anchors, the managed tensions refuting the dualists. But then the text zooms way in. We go from the macro of astrophysics down to the master builder's canvas on the ground.
The attention shifts dramatically to the meticulous microscopic care given to living things inside this massive system. The text describes the sky splitting open and the precise portioning of water.
Down to the drop.
Literally. It says every single drop is accounted for. Every stream is measured, reaching its exact destination to pull green life out of dead dirt.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. The sermon points out the diversity of output from the exact same input.
Oh, the fruits.
Yeah, it talks about blossoms exploding into fruit and how these fruits taste and look completely different from one another, even when they share the exact same soil and are watered from the exact same cloud.
It's an observation of biological complexity that demands a designer. I mean, if the soil chemistry is the same and the water is the same, why is a pomegranate so different from a date?
Exactly.
The text argues this points to a deliberate, differentiating design. It's not random output. And the imagery of the weather driving this process is equally striking. It describes clouds being herded together the way a shepherd gathers scattered animals,
I love that visual. A shepherd driving clouds across the sky.
driving them until they are heavy with water, dark from underneath, cracking with lightning, and then tilted to pour rain exactly over the dormant ground that needs it. And from that ground, the living things emerge.
Right.
The text details the perfect design of creatures, some walking on their bellies, some on 2 feet, some on 4. But the key detail is that this design, the precise shape and function of every creature, was completely known and finalized before they even existed.
Before they were even a concept in the physical world, his knowledge of them was already complete. And that extends to their livelihood, their daily sustenance.
Yes, the text guarantees it.
The sermon guarantees that every creature has a path to what sustains it. And it gets hyper-specific. It mentions the ant in the crevice of a rock, the insect hidden in the microscopic gap between 2 stones. He knows what it eats, where it finds it, and exactly how much is enough to keep it alive.
The scale of that awareness is staggering. Try to process that transition. We just went from anchoring tectonic plates with mountains to tracking the exact caloric needs of a single insect hidden inside a stone in the dark.
It's mind-blowing.
It says there's not a creature on the ground or in the sky that he does not sustain, and it is all recorded.
It is deeply beautiful, but honestly, it is also deeply intimidating. That level of absolute unblinking awareness. You listening right now, think about the sheer amount of data processing that requires. It leaves absolutely zero room for anything to be hidden or forgotten.
And it is meant to be intimidating. That realization is a deliberate setup for the final part of the sermon.
All right.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this entire awe-inspiring system of nature, the managed tensions, the weather, the ants, it has a purpose. But more importantly, it has an expiration date.
Yeah, the conversation takes a very sobering turn here. We've been marveling at the beauty and engineering of the physical world, but now we have to look at its conclusion. The exam hall is closing.
The world does not go on forever. The apocalyptic imagery here is visceral and terrifying because it describes the undoing of all those managed tensions we just talked about.
The unanchoring.
Yes. The text says, the sky you see above you will be folded up. The earth beneath you will be violently shaken until what is inside is thrown out.
Yeah.
Those mountains, the ones driven in like stakes to hold everything steady, will walk.
Walk. That's a terrifying word choice.
They will be leveled into flat ground as if they never existed.
The ultimate unanchoring. All the opposing forces
Yeah.
holding the suspension bridge together are just let go. And then comes the reconstruction. Everybody gathered together. From those who lived at the very beginning of human history to those who die at the very end.
The scale again.
Yeah, the text is very explicit. He will reseal every frame, bringing together scattered dust, returning every soul to its place, and standing everyone before him.
The final accounting. And this is where the intimacy of that awareness we talked about earlier, the awareness that tracks the ant and the stone, becomes terrifyingly personal.
Right.
The text says, "The light of that day will illuminate what you hid in the darkest rooms of your life. Every hidden thing made visible, every secret announced, and everyone is given their record." It explicitly notes that even those who forgot their own actions will be made to remember.
And here's the part that genuinely gave me chills. You don't even get to speak for yourself. Think about the testifying limbs.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine your own hands, the ones you're using right now, the ones resting on your steering wheel or holding your phone, literally testifying against you. Your hands speaking about what they did, your feet speaking about where they went, your skin speaking about what it touched.
It's unavoidable.
There is no lawyer. There is no advocate. No one to step between you and the accounting. It completely removes the illusion of privacy.
Because your own physical form, the very elements of the managed tensions you lived within, bear witness. You cannot out-argue your own biology.
It is a massive, heavy shift in tone. But it drives home the ultimate metaphor of the sermon. The world you are sitting in right now, this beautifully balanced system of opposites, the rain, the fruit, the mountains, it is just the examination hall.
It's called the home.
It is not the home. The home is what comes after, and you are building the door to that home right now with every quiet, hidden decision that no one else saw you make.
That is the crux of it. The sermon takes you from the most abstract, lofty theological concepts of the absolute straight down into the most intimate moral reality of your everyday choices.
So let's bring it all back to the present moment for the listener. We have covered a massive amount of ground today. We watched this text systematically dismantle ancient Greek anthropomorphism and Persian dualism without even breaking a sweat.
Totally.
We explored the rigorous logic of the uncreated creator who needs no trigger, the physical world as a suspension bridge of managed tensions, and finally, the terrifying clarity of the final accounting.
Yeah. And through all of this, the sermon answers the ultimate question. If you cannot picture God, if you cannot use metaphors or imagination to map him out, if he outruns time and nothingness, how do you actually know this? Absolutely.
How do you know him if your brain can't hold him?
The text closes by defining exactly what Tahi true oneness is. It is not through eyes looking. It is not through a picture in your mind. It is through a deep knowing that settles in your chest and does not move.
That's beautiful.
It is a certainty that strips away every excuse, a certainty that does not need to see a physical form to be entirely sure of its reality. That deep, unshakable resonance within the human soul, that is how you know God.
A knowing that settles in the chest and does not move. That is incredibly powerful.
This raises an important question, though, especially for us living in an age of constant information where we are obsessed with defining and figuring everything out.
Yeah, and this is exactly what I want to leave you with today. Think about everything we just discussed regarding the strict limits of our minds. If human cognition has a hard limit, and that limit is actually a feature, not a failure, how much of your daily anxiety comes from trying to perfectly map out a future or control a reality that your brain simply wasn't built to hold in the first place?
A profound thought to end on, letting go of the need to picture everything.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.